자, 마이크를 뺐습니다. 자, 잠시만요. 예, 제 목소리가 나와야 되는데. 예, 지금 만지고 있습니다. 예, 조금만요. 여기 있네. 자, 들릴 거예요. 예, 예, 들리시나요? 목소리가 왜 안 나오지? 나와야 되는데. 자, 이제 나올 텐데. 예, 들려요. 예, 이제 들려야 되는데. 그죠? 들려야죠. 아, 들리네. 예. 예, 제가 지금 연구실에 와 있어요. 제가 연구실에서 유튜브 방송을 한 것도 처음입니다. 집에서만 하고 그랬는데 한국의 연구실 외대에서는 해봤죠. 근데 이제 여기에서는 또 처음인데 이게 오늘 컴퓨터가 안 꺼지고 방송이 고루 잘 나오길 바랍니다. 예. 자, 일단은 데스크탑 오디오도 잘 나와야 될 텐데 이게 한번 틀어볼까요? 되나? 예, 나오네요. 예, 소리 나옵니다. 예, 지금 나오는 것 같고. 자, 오늘 연설 기다리고 있고요. 자, 한도님 안 주무셨고, 해나님 계시고, 벨라님 계시고, 자, 묘경님 안녕하시고요. 예, 또, 멍키 민슈님 안녕하시고요. 자, 오늘 요거 같이 볼 건데, 오늘 잘 되길 바랍니다. 은수님 안 주무셨네. 자, 영천에서 오셨고요. 제 얼굴 잘 보이시나요? 예. 저 이렇게 와 있습니다. 예. 자, 오늘 방송 잘 되길 바라고요. 예, 목소리 잘 들리시죠? 자, 예. 자, 아직 뭐 시작하려면 12분 정도 남았습니다. 예, 오늘 뭐 주식 시장은 뭐 그렇게 좋아 보이지는 않는데. 자, 그래도 오늘 연준에서 또 뭐라 그러는지 또 한번 들어보려고 왔습니다. 아무튼 컴퓨터가 잘 되고 인터넷이 잘 되는 한 예. 방송은 잘 되지 않을까 싶긴 한데 자 DS 강님 안녕하시고요. 상민님 안녕하세요. 환영합니다. 아직까지 안 주무신 자 한국 분들 한국에 계신 분들 다 환영하고요. 미국 계신 분들도 환영합니다. 자 나스닥 뭐 S&P 많이 무너졌고 예. 이장님 오늘 치약 사고 싶은 생각 안 드세요? 저는 뇌정지검인데 예 오늘 치약 사고 싶은 생각이 조금 들더라고요. 예, 예 그래서 제가 오늘 예 타겟에 갔다 왔습니다. 물도 좀 사왔고 장도 봤습니다. 예 그래서 예, 제가 오늘 치약 사러 치약은 안 사고 물을 샀습니다. 보통 타겟 제가 이제 답답하면 다 타겟 같은 데 가는데 자, 오늘 뭐 그냥 타겟 가서 물 사고 이것저것 좀 사왔습니다. 그러니까 또 예, 6월달 전조점까지 떨어지니까 뭐 이제 뭘 해야 되나 하고 자, 여기 이제 좀 약간 기로에 서 있죠. 예. 자, 성현님 안녕하세요. 예, 안녕하시고요. 자, 뭐 아침에 말씀드린 대로 주식시장은 뭐 예, S&P 3660을 찍고 올라왔습니다. 다행히. 자, 여기가 3660이었죠. 자, 여기가 예, 그 전저점입니다. 6월 전저점 3666. 예, 거기까지 내려왔고요. 자, 여기에서 이제 저가 매수세가 어느 정도 들어올지 기대되고 예, 빅스도 예, 결국 30까지 올라왔습니다. 빅스도 결국 30까지 올라왔고 이제는 진짜 예, 바닥 근처가 아닐까 이런 생각이 좀 들긴 합니다. 자, 그 다음에 예, 지금 뭐 시장 뭐 이런 상황이고요. 뭐 다 빨간데 뭐 굳이 볼 필요 있겠습니까? 봐봐야 마음만 아프지 뭐. 자, 그렇고 예. 자, 전니 준님 안녕하세요. 전저점 뚫릴지 걱정됩니다. 뭐 걱정 뭐 예, 걱정하면 어, 예, 뭐 떨어지면 뭐 떨어지는 대로 또 예, 버티는 거지 뭐. 자, 예. 예, 상황이 뭐 그렇게 좋지는 않은데 뭐 아시잖아요. 지금 오늘 상황이 요거 키면은 컴퓨터 꺼질지도 모르는데 일단은 예, 오늘 상황이 채권 시장이 확실히 예, 예, 확실히 좀 그렇습니다. 예, 보시면 알겠지만은 예, 채권 예, 10년물 3.67 예, 많이 올라와 있죠. 예, 2년물이 더 올랐죠. 4.18까지 올랐습니다. 확실히 장단기 금리 차가 훨씬 더 많이 벌어졌습니다. 58까지 30년물하고는 58. 자, 그다음에 예, 45 정도, 30, 41 정도 10년물하고 2년물은 예, 그 정도 벌어져 있네요. 자, 아무튼 이런 상황이고요. 예, 달러 쪽으로 훨씬 112.75까지 올랐습니다. 달러. 와, 진짜 미친 듯이 올라갑니다. 달러. 자, 아무튼 모든 것이 예, 최악의 상황은 맞습니다. 자, 이때가 공포를 가장 많이 느끼는 시간이 아닐까 싶고. 자, 핑크핑크님 안녕하세요. 예. 자, 오늘 또 파월이 무슨 연설을 할지, 연준에서 무슨 얘기를 해줄지 좀 들어보고요. 자, 오늘은 제 연구실에 와 있는 예, 그런 상황이고, 예, 제가 2년 만에 유튜브 역사상 처음으로 제 연구실에서 이렇게 또 유튜브 방송을 하게 됐습니다. 잘 돼야 될 텐데, 그죠? 예. 일단은 화면 조그맣게만 예, 키워놓고 할게요. 예, 너무 키우면은 이게 또 예, 컴퓨터에 무리가 올 수 있기 때문에 자, 이 정도 하겠습니다. 예. 자, 오시고요. 예, 한 분 한 분 또 들어오고 계십니다. 예, 그리고 예. 자, 아직까지 안 주무신 분들 정말 대단하세요. 성현님 안녕하시고요. 예. 핑크핑크님, 요즘 제가 제일 많이 만나는 분 교수님. 그쵸? 예. 예. 예, 저도 여러분들을 가장 많이 만나고 있습니다. 예. 뭐, 시장이 어떻든 야, 함께 해야지 또 잘 버티는 게 또 있죠. 예. 잘 보이시죠? 예. 예, 또 지금 뭐 더 봐야 되나? 뭐 굳이 더 볼 필요는 없을 것 같긴 한데, 지금 신문이라도 한번 볼까요? 예, 시간이 좀 있으니까, 예, 아직 7분 정도 남았기 때문에, 자, 지금 주식이 거의 S&P 500을 거의 예, 6월 달 예, 아래까지 내렸다 이렇게 얘기했습니다. 뭐. 자, 예, 그 다음에 레리 서머스죠. 예, 하버드 교수가 파운드화가 예, 드디어 이제 1달러보다도 더 원래 파운드화가 이제 1달러 이상을 줘야지 1파운드를 살 수 있었는데 이제는 예, 뭐 1달러보다도 못할 정도로 떨어질 거라고 얘기를 하고 예. 자, 아무튼 이런 상황입니다. 오늘 영국에서 좀 안 좋은 소식이 날라왔었죠. 예. 자, confidence in UK market vanishes, pound plunges. 자, 파운드가 폭락을 하면서 영국에 대한 이 자신감, 믿음이 사라지고 있다. 그렇게 또 얘기가 나왔습니다. 이게 블룸버그에서 나오는 예, 그런 상황이고요. 예. 맥스 쿤님 안녕하세요. 자, 오시고요. 오늘 또 예, 월가 쪽 상황은 저 월스트리트저널 한번 볼게요. 자, 월가 쪽에 이제 다우 예, 산업물이죠. 예, 다우 지수가 2022년 로우 가장 예, 낮은 데까지 내려왔다. 뭐 성장에 두려워하면서 이렇게 얘기를 했습니다. 예. 와, 다우 예, 3만 밑으로 떨어진 거 오늘 아침에 얘기 드렸는데 예, 3만 밑으로 떨어졌죠. 예. 아무튼 지금 상황이 그렇게까지 막 좋지는 않습니다. 예. 자, 이런 상황이고요. 지금 뭐 나스닥이 2.26% 빠져 있고 S&P도 2.1%, 예, 다우는 2% 떨어져 있습니다. 10년물은 예, 3.68까지 올라갔고요. 빅스 지수도 드디어 32로 올라왔습니다. 금값 예, 보시면은 1.74% 정도 떨어졌고요. 1600불 때까지 떨어졌습니다. 자, 암호화폐도 예, 18,749불 2.58% 더 떨어졌고요. 기름값마도 침체 우려로 78불까지 떨어졌습니다. 6% 떨어져 있고 달러 인덱스는 예, 훨씬 예, 이건 월스트리트저널 달러 인덱스인데요. 자, 아무튼 달러 인덱스는 지금 112까지 올라와 있는 편이고 월스트리트저널은 104 정도. 예, 이런 상황입니다. 예. 자, 뭐 일단 지수만 봐야죠, 뭐. 예, 이럴 때는. 예. 달러스 크로프님 안녕하세요. 예, 어이 오세요. 자, 어이 오시고요. 자, 오늘은 제 연구실에서 네, 이걸 들을 텐데, 자, 잘 들릴지 모르겠습니다. 최선을 다해서 오늘 할 텐데요. 예, 오늘 달프님도 또 필기해 주셔러 오셨는데, 자, 타이핑이 굉장히 빠르세요. 예, 그래서 도움을 주셔서 너무 감사드리고. 자, 어이 오세요. 자, 연구실 좋네요. 옆방에 근데 교수님이 계셔가지고 좀 조용히 해야 됩니다. 옆방 교수님 안 오길 바랬는데 옆방에 교수님 계세요. 좀 조용히 해야 돼. 자, 그렇고 예. 잘 보이죠? 예, 지금 모든 게 다 잘 보입니다. 제 얼굴도 보이고, 예, 자, 아무튼 여기가 제 연구실입니다. 예. 자, 자연님 안녕하세요. 예, 오늘은 음성이 좋아 보여요. 과도한 성대 사용을 줄여서 항상 좋은 목소리 유지하시길 기도드립니다. 감사합니다, 자연님. 저희에게 노래해 주시는 것을 음성 보호를 위해서 줄이시면 음성이 훨씬 좋을 것 같아요. 알겠습니다. 노래는 좀 줄이도록 하겠습니다. 그래요. 자, 아직 시작 안 했고요. 예. 자, 아무튼 오늘 자 월가 쪽은 예, 이런 상황이고요. 지금 뭐 시장에서는 예, 김성현님 항상 방송해 주셔서 감사합니다. 예, 저도 항상 와주셔서 감사합니다. 자, Dow hits a 2010 low as it grows fears the royal market. 자, 아무튼 다우 떨어진 거 예, 오늘 크게 달았고 예. 영국의 sweeping tax cuts and the pound tumbling. 예, 오늘 뭐 영국에서 아침에 얘기 드렸죠. 세금 감면안 내는 것 때문에 파운드화가 완전 바닥으로 꼬꾸라지고 있고 이 엔화도 떨어지고 있고 오늘 뭐 참. 예, 살로몬님 안녕하세요. 유니스님 안녕하시고요. 자, 어여 오세요. 자, 아직 3분 남았습니다. 예, 시작하려면 3분 남았고요. 자, 시작되는 대로 알려드리도록 하겠습니다. 요거 이제 시작인데 예, 아직 안 나오네요. 예. 자, 일단은 틀어놨습니다. 예, 제 컴퓨터 안 꺼지기 바라면 컴퓨터 꺼지면은 어떡하지? 제가 바로 이게 카메라로 예, 이제 핸드폰으로 켜가지고 예, 어떻게 해서든지 하도록 하겠습니다. 예, 자다가 일어나신 한도님도 계시고 예. 참. 아직까지 인터넷은 그래도 큰 문제가 없나 봐요. 이 학교 인터넷이 집 인터넷보다 느리면 어쩌나 그런 걱정을 좀 했는데 생각보다 학교 인터넷이 좀 빠르네요. 예, 나쁘진 않습니다. 예, 그렇고. 교수님 노래 열심히 듣고 계신 분들 있고. 자, 물 좀 마시겠습니다. 예. 자, 물을 하나 마셔볼까요? 예. 자, 아직 시작 안 하고 있고요. 2분 정도 남았습니다. 아직. 자, 시작 안 하고 있고. 예. 화면을 키우진 않겠습니다. 화면을 키우면은 조금 부담이 되기 때문에 조그만 화면으로 보시고요. 제 목소리 잘 들으시고 달프님 필기 잘 들으시면 됩니다. 예. 자, 패드 연설이 원래 잡혀있던 일정이었나요? 아니, 원래 있었습니다. 원래 있었던 거고 예. 뭐 예. 자, 그 다음에 예. 돈리님 안녕하시고요. 예. 근데 어차피 FOMC 회의 끝나고 파월이 연설한 것 때문에 주가가 떨어진 건 아니에요. 예. 점도표가 내년도에 5%까지 올린다고 하고 올해도 4.4%까지 올린다 그러고 GDP 성장률도 낮게 잡아버리니까 예, 그래서 떨어진 거지. 파월 연설은 생각보다 그렇게 놀랍지는 않았습니다. 예. 잭슨홀에서 말한 게 제일 컸죠. 예. 그때 이후로 떨어지기 시작한 거니까 주식시장이. 예. 자, 아무튼 예, 오늘 뭐 회의 들어보는데 파월은 5분 정도밖에 얘기 안 합니다. 그 이후로 이제 여러 가지 이제 산업의 대표들이 나와서 이제 발표를 하죠. 그래서 자, 오늘 일정이 이렇습니다. 파월은 5분 얘기예요. 파월은 5분 얘기하고 그 다음에 미셸 바우먼이 모더레이터로 예, 있으면서 자, 캐시와 이렇게 디스트리뷰러, 예, 지금 뭐 공급책이라든지 갈랜드 식당을 만드는 사람들, 힐튼 호텔의 대표, 뭐 이런 사람들 나와가지고 회의하는 건데, 이런 것까지 다 들을 필요는 있을지 모르겠는데, 자, 아무튼 지금 뭐 이런 것들 뭐 베이지북하고 약간 비슷한 거죠. 예, 산업 현장에서 일하시는 분들하고 대화를 나누는 그런 시간입니다. 올란드의 세컨 하비스트 푸드 은행에서도 나왔고 샌 젠신토 대학교 칼리지에서도 나왔고 WARP에서도 나왔고 뭐 팜 워커스 예, 농부 대표들도 왔고요. 예, 뭐 개발자들도 왔는데 뭐 파월이 연설하는 건 5분밖에 안 됩니다. 뭐 달콤한 소리 오늘 뭐 파월 때문에 예, 나왔네요. 예, 시작했습니다.
everything, the way we work, live, learn, and conduct business. And we kept these conversations around Fed lessons going. And we thought we gained valuable insight, which continues to help guide our policy decisions. Yeah. And I also think we delivered good transparency about how the Fed works to the American people.
우리는 투명성을 보여주었다. 연준에서 보여주는.
So these events have now become a permanent fixture of our broader outreach. And my colleagues and I remember, I'm sure we remember each one of these events that we've been part of. They're really the real life embodiment of our policies and the way they affect the people that we serve.
지금 우리가 세우는 정책이 사회에 어떻게 영향을 미칠지 투명성을 보여주고 있다 그러고요.
So we continue to deal with an exceptionally unusual economic set of
굉장히
disruptions.
특이한 경제 상황이고.
We're committed to using our tools to help see the economy through what has been a uniquely challenging period.
예, 이렇게 도전적인 시기에 우리가 어떻게 또 대해 나갈지 얘기하고요.
Challenges and opportunities that are shaping what we might think of as the new normal of the American economy.
이렇게 새로운 현실이라고 뉴노멀이라고 얘기하고 있습니다.
So my colleagues and I are very happy to hear from our participants today, to host those of you who are tuning in to listen.
오늘 여기 와가지고 여러분들이 하는 얘기를 들으러 왔습니다. 예, 별 얘기 안 했습니다.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm so pleased to be here with you all today in person to moderate today's discussion. And I just want to express my
미셸 버맨입니다.
for your willingness to travel to Washington D.C. to be with us.
예, 여기 워싱턴 D.C.에 와줘서 감사합니다.
Over the past year, we've held a dozen Fed Lessons events across the country, hosted by our reserve banks. And we found these conversations to be a very valuable resource for us as policymakers.
오늘 여러분들이 하는 얘기가 우리 정책 결정에 굉장히 도움이 될 거다 얘기하고 있습니다.
How you are experiencing the economy helps provide important context for the economic data that we consider.
예, 오늘 별 얘기 안 했는데요. 파월은 아무 얘기 안 했습니다.
A richer understanding of how economic conditions are impacting people.
어떻게 경제 상황이 사람들한테 영향을 미칠지 그걸 들으러 왔다고 합니다.
Stability and support for the economic well-being of all American families. Today and in other Fed Lessons events over the coming year, our intent is to shift the focus of discussion toward understanding how the pandemic experience has reshaped the economy and the world.
어떻게 사람들의 삶에 영향을 미칠지 경제 상황을 바꿔놨는지 그런 거 들으려 왔다고 합니다.
So with that, let me turn to our first set of panelists, who bring with them direct knowledge and experience of how the economic landscape is evolving for U.S.
어떻게 경제적인 풍경이
They represent
바뀌었는지 자
organizations
들어보도록
that include
하겠습니다.
small businesses, manufacturing, supply chain management, and the
예,
hospitality
소기업,
industry.
제조업 뭐 등등 다양한 분야에서 사람들을 모셨다고 합니다.
The extreme economic and financial hardships brought on by the pandemic. And during the economic recovery that has followed, you've likely also seen rapid and substantial changes in supply and demand conditions in your industries and in the
예,
communities
공급
where you
수요
live.
쪽에 경제 회복을 하면서
Given those
많은 것들을
lived
겪었을 거라고
experiences as
믿습니다.
business leaders, we are especially looking forward to hearing each of your perspectives. And as we hear from each of you, I'd like to invite my
모든
colleagues to follow
사람들의
up with
관점에
any
대해서
questions that
들어보고
you may have.
싶습니다.
So let's start with our first panelist.
아무 얘기 안 했습니다, 지금 파월은.
Tom, thank you so much for being here with us today.
오늘 연설 별거
Tom
아니었네.
is the CEO of Cashway Distributing.
오늘 베이지북처럼요. 예, 산업 현장에 있는 사람들 얘기 듣는 그냥 그런 시간입니다.
Service establishments in the Midwest and the Great Plains region.
예.
Cashway began in 1934, delivering candy to local grocery
예,
stores
캐시와
in Nebraska.
디스트리뷰터는 예,
And the company now
캔디를
manages an inventory of over
배포하는
20,000
그런
products.
기업입니다.
Cashway has remained privately held
예,
by the
원자재
Calyxt Inc.
천연가스 이런 얘기 전혀
with the
안
second and third
나왔습니다.
generation family members involved in the
FOMC
business
회의
today.
발표가
So
전부입니다.
Tom,
지금
for
뭐
our
특별한
first
건
question,
없네요.
could you please describe how the pandemic changed the demand for transportation and warehouse services? And to what extent are shortages of
예,
material and labor still
팬데믹이
affecting your
예,
business
창고
and industry?
사업하고 이 물류 쪽에 어떤 영향을 미쳤는지 좀 대답해 주세요.
The pandemic changed demand for transportation and logistic services in some manners that were expected and some that were unexpected. After the pandemic,
팬데믹으로 기대할 수 있었던 것도 있고 놀라운 것도 있었습니다.
would be released, and it was. In fact, probably the demand that existed out there was greater than what it was pre-pandemic.
예, 수요가 팬데믹 이후에 굉장히 높아졌다고
What
합니다.
wasn't expected next before the pandemic hit was the demand for workers would exceed the supply by a larger margin than what existed pre-pandemic. The size of
수요가
the
공급보다
workforce
훨씬
became
높았다고
much
합니다.
smaller than it was pre-pandemic. We also believe that many left the workforce, and for a variety of reasons. And we were wrong on that too. We really thought the workforce would grow. There was a
노동력이
shortage of
굉장히
truck
충분히
drivers and
증가할 거라고
warehouse
생각했는데
workers
그렇지
prior
않았다는
to the
거죠.
pandemic, which the pandemic further exacerbated. The shortage of truck drivers before the pandemic was estimated at 61,000 drivers. Today, the estimated shortage is in excess of 80,000 drivers. The shortage of drivers was an issue then.
그 이전에는 트럭 드라이버들 6만 1,000명이 부족했는데 지금은 8만 명 넘게 부족하다고 합니다.
We've seen some estimates that the shortage will double by the year 2020. And to give you an idea of the size of the
부족한 게 거의
driving
2배가
force that is
됐다고
out there,
합니다.
the universe of truck drivers today is 1.53 million drivers. So you take, a 5% shortage, 6-7% shortage. I mean, it's going to be significant out there.
예, 5% 6% 이렇게 부족하다는 거는 굉장히 큰 숫자를
has increased
의미합니다.
significantly for everyone in the supply chain. With the supply of labor down, the competition for drivers heated up immensely.
예,
There was
트럭
an
드라이버들
extreme amount of
공급이
pressure
적으니까
on the
임금도 많이
transportation
올라갔다고
and
합니다.
logistics side, and still is, and probably will continue to be for the foreseeable future. In order to attract and retain drivers, our company raised our wage rate 3 times in
임금을
2022 so far. In
3배나 올렸다고 합니다.
2019, we gave all our employees free health care.
2019년에는 건강보험 같은 거 공짜로 줬는데
and warehouse workers retention bonuses. If they stayed with us to
보너스까지
the end
줬다고
of the
합니다.
year, they would get a bonus paid out on the 30th of January. And that did much to solidify the workforce. Then there were the supply chain issues.
그런데 공급 문제가 있었습니다.
And the shortages of products we sell every day from our
상품이
supply chain
부족했고.
vendors was significant and still exists at a high degree today.
아직까지
Prior to the
그렇다고 합니다.
pandemic, and we measure our inbound fill rates from our vendors every week. We have a number of metrics that we utilize every week. Our
매트릭스를
inbound fill rate from our
사용하는데
vendors was 99.2%. So for every 100 items that we would get in, or we would order, we'd get 99.2 in.
예, 주문이 100개 들어오면 99개가 들어오고
Right after the pandemic started, dropped down to about 55-60%. By December of 2020, it was up to 90%.
55% 정도 되던 게 20년 말에는 90% 이상 올라갔고
dropped to 78-80%. And this year, it was probably in the 80% range, 82% range. And for the last 10 weeks, it
지금은
has been
80%
around
정도 되고
90%, which is good news.
지난주에 90% 정도
We changed
주문을
our
만족을
inventory
시키는 것 같아요.
philosophies because we had many customers out there that depended on us for products. So we started loading up our inventories. We used the popular inventory philosophy of JIT,
재고량을
just
계속
in time.
늘리고
Then
있다고
we
합니다.
changed it to JIC, which is just in case.
JIC, just in case 뭐 그때그때
so
상황에 맞게
we're over inventory, but those people need products.
재고량을
The restaurant
조절해
has got
나가고
an
있는 것
event
같습니다.
planned for Friday night, and you make a delivery Thursday, and the product isn't there. He's in trouble, and it's all our business is all about customer service.
커스터머 서비스를 위해서 열심히 하고 있다.
As a rule, today, most of the time, we don't know what we're going to receive from the vendor.
아직까지도
which
판매자들한테
is
뭘 받을지
kind of
모른다고
unusual.
한다고 합니다.
There are many challenges for the vendor community out there. A lot of it has to do with raw materials. They have labor
많은
problems also.
판매자들이
They've got
원자재를
priorities on
구하려고 노력을 하고
certain
있고
lines that they're producing. And so anyway, most of the time we don't know what we're not going to get until we're trucking
아직까지도 이
loads,
물류
or we might
쪽에서는
have
뭘
a call
받을지
from
잘
that
모른다고
vendor, which
합니다.
is a switch from the norm. And the timing of deliveries is probably not as great as it was pre-pandemic. Since the
딜리버리 자체가
pandemic
팬데믹
began,
이전보다
our
좋지는
vendors
못하다고
have
합니다.
eliminated over 900 items that we no longer have. And especially in the convenience line, that's where we really notice it. You know, between wages, worker shortages, the price of fuel, and the supply chain challenges, our costs
임금이나
have
공급
really
문제나
skyrocketed.
모든 것들이 가격이 너무 많이
We
올라갔다고
believe
합니다.
and have gone through our numbers and look at the inflation numbers. We look at our inbound freight rates, understanding that we
들어오는
get
운송 비용,
probably our products from growers, from shippers, from manufacturers. So they have freight into
제조업자들,
their
배달하는 사람들.
establishments, and their freight costs have increased. We have got freight from their establishments to our warehouse,
예.
and then we've got charges, freight charges,
예,
basically
모든 게
that are built into
시작부터 해서
our
임금
pricing
다
for our
가격이
customers.
올라갔기 때문에 지금까지 가격이 올라갈 수밖에 없습니다.
And we've been trying to calculate what percentage of the food inflation is relative to transportation and logistics.
예,
And we've
음식과
got kind
배달
of a
사이의
consensus
비용
between
관계에
all of
대해서
us
계산을 계속 하려고
that
한다고 합니다.
probably 38 to 45% of the food inflation that we're feeling right now is because of logistics and transportation. It could be greater. It could be greater.
38에서 45%가 물류 비용이 올라가서 음식 가격이 올라갔을 거라고 말을 합니다.
We do a cost index report on our total product mix, and we do that every week. We started doing that about 25 years ago, and because obviously you've got to have growth, and you've got to have organic growth, and the difference between the growth you're realizing every week and inflation is basically organic growth. So our cost index report, and I've got numbers from, I think since 2020, indicate where we've been, the path we've been on.
2020년부터 비용을
This
계산하고
last week,
있는데
our inflation rate was probably the lowest it's been in,
인플레이션
I'm gonna
비율이
guess, probably 4 or 5 months. It was down to 10.3%. But yet,
10.3%까지
compare
낮아졌는데
that to what the inflation rate was the same week a year prior. Our total inflation from 2021 is probably 22, 23%.
22에서 23%였는데 지금 10.3% 정도 좀 낮아진 것 같긴 해요.
We're seeing some drop there along the line. We're also seeing some softness in the marketplace, which
예, 시장 상황이 조금 부드러워지고
probably is
있다고 합니다.
indicative of why the inflation rate is lower. On the other side of the
인플레이션이 좀
coin,
떨어진 것 같다고
we
생각하고요.
still have increases coming through. We're still struggling with product shortages and labor.
여전히 상품이 적고
product
사람이 좀
shortages
적다고 합니다.
Occurring for a variety of reasons.
상품이 적은 건 많은 이유들, 다른 이유들 때문이고
Inflation, probably yet this year and probably next year, is the drought we've been experiencing. I can tell you right
올해나
now,
내년이나 비쌀
and
것
we hear
같다고.
this from the potato growers. We've seen the
감자
price
생산하는
on
사람
what we
얘기하고
call
있습니다.
Baker's potatoes double in the last couple of weeks. And this last year, the potato growers in the Idaho area, which is really the prime country for growing the kind
아이다호의
of potatoes
감자 얘기하고 있습니다.
a food service establishment likes to have, they knew they weren't going to get water. So instead of planting potatoes, they planted wheat. And so now there's going to be plenty of wheat that comes out of there, but the potatoes are going to be thin. There's an extreme drought that's hit in California. In California is
예, 뭐 가뭄으로 인해서 포테이토가 좀 이렇게
one of the products
상황이
we're
안
not
좋다
going to have
그러고.
this year is going to be pears. I remember in 2012 when the drought hit, and we sell a large number of school districts. We imported fruit mix. We
옛날에
imported
가뭄이
peaches from
들었을 땐
Israel.
과일도
And
해외에서
Israel
수입해
has,
왔다고 합니다.
And that was probably the only place
학교 때문에.
some of those products were available. So we may be in that same boat here down the road. Tomatoes are a little bit on short supply.
토마토도 좀
The other thing that's
부족하고요.
happening, we're in the corn belt of the country, along with Iowa and
옥수수로
Illinois.
유명하죠.
And we've had a lot of drought there. We're finally starting to get some rain.
가뭄 때문에
One of the
옥수수
things that
작황도 안
happened
좋았다고
last
합니다.
year, and you've read about this and you heard about it, the price of, because of the war in Ukraine, the price of fertilizer, nitrogen,
퍼틸라이저, 비료 같은 것들 우크라이나 전쟁 때문에 가격이 올라갔었죠.
Nitrogen went from like $200
질소죠,
a ton
나이트로젠이.
up to $930. I know for a fact there were many farmers out there that were doing a balancing act. How much less of this can we use and still grow a crop? And what does that add to my costs? So my guess is going to be that we might find our production of maybe corn and soybeans maybe down a little bit this year. And depending on what happens next year and the experience factors they've got there may, have an impact on whatever
내년에도 무슨 일이 벌어질지 모른다 그래서요.
The beautiful part in our area of the country is the cattle market is good, and we're starting to get a little bit of rain now.
지금은 좀
But if you
비가
look
좀
around
와서
the
좀
world,
다행이라고 합니다.
You go into South America, you go into China, you go into Europe, and it seems like every continent is having their share of drought. And
예,
so this might
모든
be a factor
대륙에서
of
가뭄이
how,
있었다고 합니다.
in the future for food production, and especially the near future.
예, 가까운
This is the
미래에
personal
뭐 농작물 작황은 안 좋을 것 같다고 얘기하고 있는 것 같아요.
Labor is still an issue.
예, 노동이 아직도
The
문제입니다.
driver pool is still far from being adequate.
예,
We have a
운전자들이 많이
driving
부족하고요.
force of 250 individuals, and we have positions we work to fill every week. There was a
매주
time
운전자들을
during the
채워 넣으려고
pandemic we were
하는데
short. Times we were short 20 and 30 drivers. We have one supervisor for every 10 drivers. And
예, 10명 운전자보다 한 명씩 감독원을 두려고
time
그러는데
off for other drivers and the like. Sorry about that. I forgot to turn that on.
예, 전화 왔네요.
If I can find it.
전화를 못 찾겠다고 합니다.
Sorry about that.
No problem.
Interesting ringtone.
Maybe to our second question, which is about what your business outlook for next year.
I was just going to get into
경제
that.
전망에 대해서 어떻게
What other
생각하냐고
challenging
물어봅니다.
issues might be facing?
도전적인 상황은 뭐냐고 물어보고
You
있습니다.
know, our business outlook for next year is good. I wouldn't say it's great.
내년
First off,
경제 상황
we sell
괜찮을 것 같다고
commodities.
얘기하네요.
Our company was
Good,
founded in
좋다 그럽니다. 아주
1934,
좋진
and that was
않지만.
during tough times.
전화 왔네요.
It was founded in 1934, and the products we sell are really, in a sense, recession-proof. They're people have got to eat. So
예,
we're
사람들
looking
지금
for-
우리가
we're
지금
looking
판매하는 게
for
음식이기
probably a
때문에 사람들은
fairly
먹어야
decent
되니까
year.
뭐 음식
On the
판매는
other side of
계속해서
the
잘 될
coin,
것
there's going to
같네요.
be casualties in the marketplace, and we could have some short-term challenges out there. And the way we're dealing with that is interesting. We're working programs right now to keep our customers profitable, and we're reaching out there.
커스터머들이 수익을 잘 내기 위해서 노력하고 있다고
I think
합니다.
during the recession in the 80s, there were a lot of folks that didn't have a lifeline. Communication wasn't great. So
80년대랑
we're
비교하고 있습니다.
reaching out to those folks now.
80년대 사람들이
We need to see
많이
them through
살기
this.
힘들었다고 합니다.
And it's not a matter of extending them more credit. It's not a matter of giving them some type of stimulus along the line.
예, 크레딧
It's
신용을
helping them
주는 게
better
아니라
manage
사람들한테
their
직접
business.
도움을 주려고 노력을 하나
Make
봐요.
it more profitable. So that's going to be
수익성을 높이기 위해서
that's gonna be
노력한다고
one of the
합니다.
challenging issues we have. The other challenging issue we really have, and this is critical, if there's I think there's I can't tell you exactly, there's over 2 billion trucks in this country.
이
We have
나라에는
not been able to
2빌리언
upgrade
7억이 있다고
our
합니다.
rolling stock.
20억
Our
정도.
rolling stock for probably 2 years. We have 250 tractors. We have 400 trailers that we need to make the deliveries. we haven't been able to acquire a new tractor since November of 2019. We typically replace 10% of our fleet every year. The last tractors that we purchased in November
뭐
of
트랙터도 사고
2019
트레일러도 사고 이런 것도 배달을 하나 봐요.
Pretty much a standard product that we buy. Got 5 coming next week. They're $165,000 a tractor, 40% increase. Plus, we've got a pick
16만 대의 트랙터를 배달을 한다 그러는데 40%나 증가를 했다고 합니다.
Kind of halfway of having probably 20 tractors. We really need 50. We're guaranteed to have 20 tractors in 2023. So we're gonna spend probably 5, 6, 7 years getting things caught up in our fleet. The cost of putting trucks on the road today is very significant. It's gone up right around $80,000. So that's going to have an
트랙터
impact on
20대 배달하는데
transportation.
8만 불씩이나 든다고 합니다. 비용이 많이 든다고 하네요.
And the options aren't great. We had a number of trucks sit this last year for 7, 8 days because we didn't have microchips. They were 2017, 18 models. The parts availability.
예, 트럭이 마이크로칩이 없어서 트럭이 멈춰 있었던 적도 있습니다.
Trailers we ordered 2 years ago that we finally got in the first part of this year. Those went up 40%.
2년 전에 고장난 트레일러 부속을 지금 받았다고 합니다.
Probably an average cost increase that we're going to see with rolling stock for any
결국 비용이 많이
operation.
든다는 얘기를 하고 있습니다.
So I think I'm getting down to the end.
Tell me, how does that inflation and cost for these necessary replacement items, how does that impact your
필요한
outlook going forward,
부속을
or changes to how you
바꾸는
prioritize
비용이 얼마나
expenses
드냐고.
in other areas?
One thing about it, you got to have the cash flow to do it, and you've got to have. So that will be the challenge in developing a plan, a business plan, which we will do. I think in our company is sound and solid. I don't see a problem there, but I do look at other companies in the industry, and I think they will have some challenges there along that line.
사업 계획을 세우는데 이런 것들이 굉장히 중요한 거 있는데 뭐 잘 해결하고 있나 봐요. 이 회사는.
It's going to be a challenge.
뭐 부속 바꾸고 이런 게 굉장히 도전적이긴 하지만 돈을 더 쓰면서 이런 부속들을 구해서 하나 봐요. 뭐 유지를 위해서 굉장히 노력을 한다고 합니다.
The other thing we need to do that's going to be important is we need to get the manufacturing of a lot of those component parts back here in this country.
이 나라에서 부속들을 만드는데
things that we have to source outside of our country.
이 나라 바깥에서 원자재들을 들여와야겠죠.
When it comes to keeping your trucks on the road.
트럭을 계속 운영하기 위해서는 뭐 이런 부속들을 잘 만들어서 운영을 해야 됩니다.
Just a couple, one narrow, one broad. The first question is, are you able to pass these costs along? You obviously have been hit by.
이 비용을 전가할 수 있냐?
The second thing is really, do you feel like we're getting through this process? There was enormous disruption to your business and many others.
많은 뭐 힘든 점들이 있는데 이런 것들 다 잘 지나갈 수 있을 것 같냐?
But do you feel like we're getting back to a better place with the suppliers and the customers yet? Is there a sense of
공급이나 이 커스터머들을 위해서
we're making the move, and I think the moves you make are extremely important, and I think that'll get us in the right direction, and I applaud you for it.
바른 방향으로 가야 된다는 건 맞는데.
I do think that we're moving maybe a little faster than what I thought in terms of the economy and everything.
모든 점에 있어서 좀 빠르게 움직이고 있다고 합니다.
So no, I'm confident we're going to get there.
자신감 있게 뭐 정상으로 돌아갈 수 있을 거라고 생각합니다.
I remember when the pandemic hit us. They said, in 30, 45, or 60 days, things will be back to normal.
팬데믹이 터졌을 때 3, 40일 있으면 회복할 거라고 생각했지만
period of normalcy, it's going to be probably 2, 3 years off.
2, 3년이 걸렸습니다, 결국엔.
we've got to get caught up. It's not going to happen overnight.
뭐 하루 아침에 해결될 문제는 아닙니다.
Yeah, we have. And the dollars we work with are large enough if, and the customers really don't have a choice.
커스터머들은 선택권이 없습니다.
We can't lock in old pricing unless they've got contracts somewhere.
우리는 옛날 가격을 유지할 수는 없습니다.
And so they end up having to pay it.
가격 올리면은 커스터머들은 올려서 살 수밖에 없다고 얘기하고
Part of
있네요.
the problem is you don't know what the cost is. If you ask me what the cost of eggs,
비용이 얼마인지 지금
I can tell
정확하게
you
모른다고
probably
합니다.
in a few minutes because someone just told me what they were paying here a little bit ago. But you know, I mean, it's fast and furious.
예, 빠르게 빠르게 모든 것들이 해결되고 있습니다.
Demand is still there.
예, 소비는 수요는 여전히 있다고 합니다.
The amount of money that is still floating out there, you know, in the
예,
economy.
돈이 아직도 많이 있다고 얘기하고.
It's going to be the lower income people that really take a beating.
예, 저소득층이 지금 문제가 있다고 합니다.
We've, you know, anyone that's in production, if they're in sales, if they're in manufacturing, whatever the case is, their salaries have kept up, drivers and everything. But we've got a layer of people out there that haven't had a lot of opportunities for increases.
임금이 많이 올라가고 있는데 임금이 안 오른 사람들도 있다고 얘기하고 있습니다.
One that hasn't had an increase and figure out how we can give them one, and how we can give them one that's substantial enough, so that's going to be a challenge.
예, 굉장히 도전적일 저소득층 걱정을 해야네요.
Appreciate your perspectives and
저 사람은 사탕 운반하는 트럭 쪽, 물류 쪽, 창고 쪽 일을 하시는 대표입니다.
A restaurant and performing arts based in Raleigh, North Carolina. Chidi is a self-taught cook who studied recipes
이번에
while
레스토랑
pursuing a career as a
대표로
guitarist
나왔습니다.
in several rock bands. She was a semi-finalist for the
노스캐롤라이나에 있는 레스토랑 운영자가 나왔습니다. 지금 베이지북 같아요. 예, 각 산업 분야에서 일하시는 분들을 워싱턴 DC로 초청해서 지금 이제 물어보고 있습니다. 지금 파월은 오늘 뭐 특별한 연설은 없고요. 그냥 이 사람 저 사람한테 연준이 정책 세울 때 필요한 정보를 모으고 있는 상황입니다. 그래서 지금 아까 트럭 하시는 분들 얘기 들어보면은 물가가 좀 떨어지고 있는 게 좀 보이니까 연준도 좀 완화적인 정책으로 곧 바뀔 수도 있지 않을까 이런 생각을 합니다. 내년에 또 경기도 좋다고까지 대답을 해줬어요.
And have you seen changes in dining patterns that you think could be long?
사람들의 외식 패턴이 바뀌었다고 생각하냐?
Thank you for having me back. It's a pleasure to be here.
와서
So our
좋습니다.
restaurant, music venue, bar complex is one building that we have been paying rent on since 2010.
2010년부터 레스토랑을 운영하고 있습니다. 한 건물에서.
So, you know, there were many factors leading to that decision, and most of them are really, you know, I want to say at the outset that I'm a restaurant owner, I'm a chef, and we're working on a new project.
당시 요리사면서 레스토랑 경영을 하는데
from my perspective as an independent restaurant owner, restaurants are ubiquitous. You can eat at a fast food chain, you can eat at a
패스트푸드 가서 먹을 수도 있고 다이닝 체인 가서 먹을 수 있는데 이분은 혼자서 독립적으로 운영하는 분입니다.
sector of the industry because our challenges are unique and the way we
지금 상황이 굉장히 독특한 상황입니다.
because the math is very different.
다른 체인들하고는 좀 틀릴 겁니다.
So many factors led us to decide to close our doors, and the main thing is that you know, dining patterns have changed. Our
외식 패턴이 좀 바뀌었습니다.
City center of a very small city, we're the capital of North Carolina.
조그만 도시의 중앙에 다운타운에 있는 식당입니다. 옆에 거버먼 빌딩도 많고 오피스들도 많고 테크 컴퍼니들도 많다고.
You know, small firms of that nature. We relied
듀크
on
근처인가?
presence in that aura. You know, people would come to lunch, and whether they ate with us or not, they were aware that we were there.
예, 점심 먹으러 많이 온다고 그러고요.
Professional white collar workers.
예, 전문적인 백인들이 많이 온다고.
Downtown anymore, and they discovered new eating habits. They cooked more at home. They
예, 사람들은 점점 집에서 더 요리를 많이 하고요.
Awesome. they've discovered their neighborhood restaurants, and
예, 그들 집
they just
근처에 있는
approach
식당들을
dining
발견하기
out
시작했다고
differently.
합니다.
And they didn't maybe want to make a trek downtown and struggle
예,
to find
다운타운까지
parking
와가지고
and navigate construction that
이
has
식당에서
been
밥을
ongoing.
먹으려고 하지
Construction
않는다고
does not
합니다.
slow down from my perspective. In fact, things take longer to build, and I know this because we're building out a space right now for our new project. So the project starts, and then you wait 2 months for an electrical, a little breaker switch or whatever, 2 months. Or for a meter base, which we're just nowhere to be
새로운
found,
공간을
or
마련하고
copper,
있는데
whatever
두 달이나
it is.
걸린다고 합니다.
So we're not the only downtown that has a lot of construction just sort of dragging on and on. And that doesn't really invite people to come to your restaurant,
예,
right?
건설을 많이 하고
I go
있다고
to Nashville
하는데요.
and I see the streets are dug up for years, and there's a restaurant right behind that. It's very easy for people to say, let's just go somewhere else.
예, 건설을
And
많이
they
하고
discover a new
있으니까
spot
다른
and
도시로
they
많이,
go there,
다른 데 가서 밥을 많이
and
먹으려고
there's-
한다고 합니다.
There are a lot of options when it comes to dining out and dinner and how you approach
예,
your
외식할
food for
때
your
선택권이
family,
너무
for yourself.
많다고 얘기하고
So
있고.
we're very cognizant of that, and that's a very mercurial kind of situation.
경쟁이 심해졌나 봐요, 많이.
And during the pandemic, all restaurants I think were faced with decisions on how to pivot. That the P word that keeps rearing its head. And so we all tried things that
코로나
were
때 어떻게
completely outside
전환할지
of our
많이
normal
노력을
way of
했다고
operating.
합니다.
Fine dining restaurants started doing meal kits and takeout, and so you could get, maybe you were mailing something from Goldbelly. So we're doing things that are completely different for us. We're not built out for these kind of operations.
팬데믹
but we
동안에
did
전혀
them.
다른 일을 했다고
And so you
합니다.
start thinking about different ways to operate, and the consumer is kind of connecting with you in a different way. So things are still really very much in flux. I don't think that
많은
we've settled
것들이 많이
into
변동하고
what
있습니다.
an independent restaurant looks like and what this industry looks
아직까지
like.
뭔가 이렇게
And
딱
I don't
정해진
think
게
we're gonna
없나
get there
봐요.
for another 3 to 4 years. But in this meantime, people who have 1 or 2 shops can't really sustain this much change and these many losses for that long.
변화에
If
대해서
I had
레스토랑 한두 개
100
들고
shops,
있으면 쉽게 적응하기가 쉽지 않다고
making a
합니다.
very small profit or very small loss, you're kind of, it's an aggregate. You're looking at the health of your total business. But for us, several weeks
뭐
or several
체인점이
months,
있으면 잃는 곳도 있고요,
what
뭐
are
돈을 버는
pretty
곳도
big
있다고
losses for us,
하는데 식당
very
하나만
difficult to
들고
navigate.
있으면은
So
한 번
we're,
크게 타격을
we're
입으면
trying
심하다고
to,
하죠.
within our footprint, within the menu that we are known for, within the type of service that we do, the way our dining room operates, how many people we need to work in the kitchen, how many people we need to prep, how many people we need to get a guest from the door
메뉴라든지
to the table, and then what
요리하는
happens after
사람들이라든지
they
서빙 보는
place the order, and all of
사람들이라든지
those little
뭐
steps.
주문
Restaurants
상황이라든지
are basically dependent on a series of repetitive steps, and all of those are very time sensitive. There's no malleability, there's no work from home, there's no take your time.
시간에 굉장히
because
민감하고
if the guest has a
계속적으로
bad
반복적인
experience,
일을 해야
they'll
되는
blast
상황입니다.
forever, right? And if you don't know that that's happening, because as an owner operator, you're also working. You're no longer just overseeing. You're washing dishes and you're cooking and you're prepping and hosting and bartending, and my husband and I have done all of these things many times over the last 2 years. You're going to miss those details, and that kind of, all these little cuts kind of cut down your business, and they cut down the level in which you really want to be operating at, and that the guests, expect.
사업을
And that's
많이
not to say that
줄여나가고
I think
있고요.
we did a really good job.
남편하고 같이 요리도
exhausting.
하고
We're
뭐
two
서빙도
people, we're
보고
a family operation, and places like ours, our staffing situation has been just like Mr. Henning alluded. It's
사람
always
쓰는
a
게
difficult industry to
정말
staff.
어렵다고 합니다.
Now it feels impossible sometimes. I do feel like it's getting a little bit better, but
지금 좀
we've
좋아지긴
lost a lot
했는데
of our young people
젊은
who we
일하는
might have
사람들을
considered as career hospitalitarians. They maybe want to get a job in tech sales or go back to school or maybe become a nurse. Well, that would be an ideal
미국에서는
way to
레스토랑에서
go,
서빙 보는 것도 전문직으로
we can't
생각을
really
많이
compete with those kind
했는데
of
젊은
benefits.
사람들이
We
그런
can't
거 이제
compete
안
with
하고
not
다른
looking at
쪽으로
night.
다
We
많이
can't
옮겨갔다고
compete
합니다.
with work from
학교로도
home.
들어가고
We can
테크
only
쪽으로도
offer so much
가고
paid time off, and that demand kind of gets sucked in by, or completely obliterated by people getting COVID. And, you know, so from the start of the pandemic until this May of 2022, we had maybe 3 people with COVID. And between May
그리고
and
사람들을
August,
고용을 하면은
probably 80% of our
벌써
staff
3명이나
at
코로나가
one point
걸렸다고 합니다.
myself included, and we are very careful. We
예,
test all
자꾸
the
코로나를
time, mask and everything.
걸리니까
So,
예, 또
you know, the
중간중간
way the
사람이 또
pandemic
부족하죠.
is affecting day-to-day life isn't as data-driven as it is now. It's just a reality, right? So
예, 지금
if Cook
지금
is out
현실
for 7 to 10
자체가
days,
코로나를 계속 신경 쓰면서 여전히
in
일을 해야 된다고
2019,
합니다.
they'll be like, you can't do that. That's unheard of. Like, what do you have? You know, the measles? Like, what? That never happened. But now we have to sort of think about how many people we need with those contingencies built in. But yet, the cost of each person's hourly wage is, you know, 15, 20% higher.
레스토랑에 사람이 몇 명이 일하고 임금은 15에서 20% 정도 올라가 있고 그때 사람들이 또 쉬는 것까지 고려해야 되고.
Part of the city is, and if there's a variant that was raging, that was more of an issue maybe last year when it was. Now it's just everybody gets COVID all the time. It seems like so. It's
예,
not
지금은
this,
모든
like,
사람이
wildfire,
코로나를 걸리는 것 같다는 생각이
ebbs and
듭니다.
flows, but we've had to sustain the losses throughout that time.
우리 계속해서 손해를 보고 있다고 합니다.
So we have our labor costs going up, and then you know.
노동 비용 올라가고 있고.
Your question, Chairman Powell, was, can you pass that increased cost down to the customer? Well, we're the customer. We're the end game.
비용 전가할 수
And we can
있겠냐?
only raise our prices so much. So
예,
you know, when you go to a restaurant, everybody goes to a restaurant.
음식 가격 올릴 순 없다.
See,
우리가 진짜
a chicken dish or
커스터머다.
a pasta, an entree that
모든
maybe
재료들이 다 요리가
previously
돼서
in a
레스토랑에
nice
도착하면 우리는
restaurant was
마지막이라고
$28.
하죠. 비용
Well,
전가를
now
하기가
it's
쉽지
maybe
않다 그죠?
34, but you're not going to pay 45 for it. I mean, you're just going to say that's insane.
네,
I can
음식
make that
가격을
at home, and,
45불씩
you know,
차지할 순 없죠.
You think you can. Some things you can, and some things it may not be quite as good.
예,
but
음식
still
가격 올리는 데도
they'll
한계가
survive,
있습니다.
you know. So there's sort of this like we reach a ceiling of not being able to have
천장이
any
있습니다,
push
음식 가격
those
올리는데.
costs for us down. So you know we see fuel surcharges on our invoices from deliveries. And again, as an
뭐 연료
independent
가격도 써야
restaurant, I'm a
되고
chef
배달할 때
operator.
연료
I
비용.
make creative decisions anyway about how I cook, what I put on my menu. I work with a lot of small farmers, but they're leaving too. You know, they're
예,
getting tech
농장하고
jobs and
연관이
design
되어 있지만
jobs
그
because
사람들도
it's
살아야
hard
되기
for them to
때문에
find somebody to help harvest their crops and bring them to us. You know, it's a small operation, so.
예, 그 사람들도 경작하는데 사람을 쓰기가 쉽지
I'm not sure if
않고.
that directly answers exactly your question, but there are so many factors that go into a very simple decision on where am I going to have dinner tonight, and it's everything from your location, what happens in your neighborhood, where do you live,
외식할
what's around
때
you,
여러 가지
how much
아주
are you
단순하게 결정한다는
prioritizing,
거죠.
supporting local.
자기 집에서 가까운 데서 먹으려고 그러고 굳이 다운타운까지 오겠냐 그 얘기 또 하고 있습니다.
Income, you know, who is able to operate? Is the restaurant that you normally go to able to have all of their sections open, or did 4 of the 7 servers that they have call out today, and so you still have to open, but you can only sacrifice so much of what you can and can't do. You can't say, "Hi, welcome to our restaurant. We have 3 of the 9 items from this first section available today, and 2 of the entrees are available. I'm so sorry." You'd be like, "What is this?
사람들이
I'll never come
왔는데
back."
7명 중에
But
3명만
in
일하고
reality, I wish
있고
we could do
그다음
that,
메뉴도
you know,
다 제공할 수 없는
because
상황이
sometimes
오기도
you just
하고.
really have to say, "Can we open or not?"
Well, thank you so much
예,
for
문을
your,
열어야 되냐 닫아야
excellent
되냐 이런 거
answer to the
고민을
first
많이 한다고
question. It was
합니다.
so good. You answered my second question, which was about inflation.
인플레이션에 대한 질문 벌써 대답했다 너는.
Talk a little bit more about. You talked about wage inflation, but
노동임금
income
인상에
inflation, you
대해서
talked about how you
좀
can't pass that
얘기해봐라고
on. Are there other
물어보고 있습니다.
concerns? And I would like to open it up to my colleagues too.
I have a quick thing to add. I think real estate is such an important component
예,
of,
부동산도 굉장히 중요하다고
of small
합니다.
brick and mortar places.
이런 조그만
you know,
식당에선
real estate has been thriving and growing and
예,
booming,
부동산이
and that's great.
굉장히 많이
But,
올라왔는데
developments are happening everywhere in every city
예,
in
발전도 잘
the
하고
country,
있고.
and you know the starting rent is a certain amount.
근데 렌트 비용이죠, 월세 비용이.
You know, in previous times, 30% of your revenue food costs, 30% labor, and then you have your operating expenses, blah blah blah. Now labor is hovering around 48-50%. Your food costs
비용
have gone up
중에
to 35%.
사람
So there's
쓰고
75%. Credit card processing fees keep going up 3.5%
뭐
to 4%
크레딧 카드
off the
비용도 많이
top.
올라가고
Rent is now, I mean, where does it fit? After a point, you get to
사람들
100%
임금 주고
and you
재료
haven't
써야
paid all the
되고
bills, so now
크레딧
you're
카드
operating
비용도
at a
써야
loss.
되는데
So,
렌트
for
비용을 어디서
us, we were fortunate
감당하냐?
enough to be able to buy a building, and that kind of changes everything. But we're lucky, we
예, 빌딩을 사면 다행인데
utilized an SBA program and worked with a local bank, and we've been in business for a dozen years. We have a presence in our city, but that's not the case for everybody, and that's not accessible for
우리는
everybody.
빌딩이
So,
있는데 많은 사람들이
rent going
월세
up and
비용을
everything
어떻게
else going
감당할
up,
거냐, 빌딩이
and,
없으면.
the ability of a small independent restaurateur who has a dream and a vision and really wants to invest in their neighborhood, they may or may not be able to do that in the future.
Yeah. So thank you for that presentation. Just have a quick question. You said that this was a performance space and restaurant. Most of the conditions you talked about had to do with the restaurant business. Are the conditions the same for, it seems like they would even be worse during COVID for a performance space.
They absolutely are. We never actually reopened the performance space once the pandemic hit. And our space is very small. It's 250 people. So, it just wasn't safe for so long.
250명을
All the
감당할 수 있는
touring bands
식당이고요.
canceled their tours. And because we're a small space, we really book small bands. and they're
여행을
either on
취소하는
their way up
사람들도
or on their
있고.
way down. That's where we get them. So, it's expensive to tour. Gas is up. Hotels are expensive.
호텔도
It's maybe
비싸고.
not safe. Your record came out. You're not selling records anymore. Everything is digital. So all of
레코드도
that
더
math
이상 안
has changed.
팔고.
Maybe people have gone to see their favorite band in an amphitheater. That math is totally different. So small performance venues, I mean, that's really hard.
공연이
You can't
굉장히
really
줄어들고
sustain
있다고 합니다.
that kind of business 365 days a year with local bands. You just can't do it.
Governor Jefferson has.
예,
Thank
공연
you so much
사업은
for
거의
your
접은 것
presentation. I
같네요,
have a question
이분은.
around your strategy towards your workforce. You mentioned that you had a team in your prior business that's closed down
필립
and now you're
제퍼슨입니다.
transitioning to a new project.
총재고요.
Is your strategy to try to retain those workers that you're familiar with, such that if we're thinking about the economic impact, there's some possibility that those people might be redeployed in your context, or is what you're doing now so different that it really is the case that these are workers that were released into the economy, they have to find other engagements and things of that sort?
사람들을
It's a little bit of
새로
both.
고용할 수 있냐고
We
물어보고 있습니다.
did retain some folks for a really long time. I mean, we've had some staff.
사람들을 오랫동안 고용한 사람들이 있습니다.
But then most of them were in the last 9 months. We offered 2-week severance to everybody, that we paid after we closed. We offered, an open door. Please come back and work with us in the.
예, 문을 닫은 다음에
when we
2주치
reopen,
월급을
we have
주긴
a couple of
했습니다.
people that we retain and going to pay through this
계속해서 그
transition.
사람들을
So,
유지하려고 했는데
it would be a very different situation, and the timeline and how all of that worked would be different if I didn't know, and that most of my team could go and get another job. And in fact, I really helped.
예, 많은
place a lot of
사람들이 다른
people with
직업을
a job
구했다고
at
합니다.
Restaurants that I like and that I know, operate with integrity and pay their staff well and treat their staff well. If it had been a different time, we probably would have, said we're closing in 2 months, and it would have been a lot slower. But I know that most people can find a job very easily. But even still, we gave them enough time to find that work, be paid, and then help them find another position.
예, 문을 닫았을 때
Thanks,
다른
everyone,
사람들이
for
직업을
your
구하게 도와주었다고
questions.
합니다.
We'll move on to our third panelist, Jess Pettit. Jess is the Senior Vice President of Commercial Strategy, Insights and Analytics at Hilton, a leading global hospitality.
힐튼 대표 나왔습니다.
With a
호텔
portfolio of
산업입니다.
18
이번에는
brands, comprising 7,000 properties and 1.1 million rooms in 122 countries and territories. It's a pretty big role. So in your role at Hilton, Jess delivers
여행
customer
쪽이죠.
performance and economic insights
전
to
세계적으로
Hilton's
운영하고
leadership teams
있습니다.
and partners. Just leads the only fully cross-functional global analytics team in the hospitality industry, covering brands, digital, call center, new hotel development, and other key corporate disciplines. Just is a born and raised hotelier and has committed his career to his passion, the impact that
이분
hospitality
소개하고
has on
있습니다.
society. So, Jess, we'd like to hear a little bit about how this past summer
우리 계속 이거 들어야
has,
될까요?
impacted your business and hotel occupancy rates compared
경제
to
상황
during the
거의 다 아는데.
pandemic. And then, where were those customers coming from? Was it for recreation, business, conferences?
First off, thanks for the opportunity to be here. It's truly a privilege, and thank you for all you all do.
감사합니다.
on behalf of
초대해
all of us.
줘서.
It's an interesting dichotomy between Chidi and I, in the large and small business. Although I'd say many of the same dynamics exist in what we're seeing from a hospitality industry perspective.
예, hospitality죠.
I
이제
struggle to imagine an industry
접대업이죠.
that
예.
was dealt as difficult to
서비스업이요.
grow during the pandemic. 80% down plus in the depths of it, and it's been a challenge, but also
굉장히 도전적이었고.
positive side for hospitality on our end. Starting to see that real recovery, and it starts with
예,
leisure
긍정적인 면은 우리는
To your
회복하고 있다고
question.
합니다.
over the course of this summer, but also last summer, our industry
작년
shifted
여름하고
much
이번
more
여름하고.
towards a leisure focus. It ties very closely towards disposable income,
좀
stimulus.
레저
Folks
쪽으로
had,
좀 포커스를 더 많이
more
뒀다고
money
합니다.
to spend on travel. So, complete opposite of 2020. The dynamic in 2021 summer and 2022 was this concept of revenge travel, right? You had
작년
not seen
여름하고
your
이번
families.
여름은 이제
You hadn't seen your
보복적
friends.
소비가
You hadn't
많았다고
been able
합니다.
to go to the national parks or see much of the country. And so revenge travel was a very real thing for us. And we see that
예,
dynamic
보복적 소비가
in
정말
leisure markets,
현실적으로
beach markets,
실제로
Southeast
일어나고
US.
있었다고
You see that
합니다.
dynamic in national park markets. You see it in
달러까지
long
높으니까
weekends.
미국
The
사람들
holidays
해외여행도 많이
become
했죠.
much more compressed from a business demand perspective. And so over the course of the summer, we saw our demand from leisure travel, so when you account for all seasonality and all the other noise, up 10% versus 2019.
이번
Right.
여름에는
And that's overall
10%나
from the
증가했다고 합니다. 2019년보다도 더
which is
많이
great.
늘어났다고
But then you
합니다.
realize that there's another 50 or 60% of our business which comes from business travel and group travel, right? And in order for our industry to truly have the compression it needs to be successful for our independent owners,
비즈니스 트래블은 많이 안 일어난 것
you
같은데.
need all three
예,
parts
그런 게 거의 5-60%를 차지하는데 그쪽은 많이 안 늘었고요. 레저 쪽으로 좀 많이 수출이 늘어났다고.
Well, we started to see the initial signs of corporate travel coming back. Starting the beginning of this year, corporate travel was down closer to 25-30%.
25에서 30% 올해 초에 줄었다고 합니다.
10% down range.
지금 10%고요.
Group travel, obviously, for all the reasons you talked about events, all the
집단으로
reasons
여행
that
가는
group was
거.
most depressed from a demand perspective, we saw that in our industry, down roughly 35%.
35% 줄었다고
By the end
합니다.
of the year, we expect that full year number to be closer to 15-16% down.
15에서 16% 더 줄어들 거로
So you're seeing
예상합니다.
the recovery, and it's very much as we would have predicted it back in April of 2020. We built our first models, and we said the first thing that was going to be coming back was essential travel, what Tom talked about earlier, the folks that we needed to travel across the country.
4,
And we saw leisure
5월에는
travel,
필수적인
small
여행은 좀
businesses
회복했다고
which
합니다.
needed to travel in order to
예,
be successful.
필수적으로 여행해야
We
되는
saw a
것들.
bit of an air pocket there before we saw large companies coming back and then finally larger groups.
많은
I
큰
think, the other
그룹들하고
dynamic we see, and I
많은
often
그룹들이
use this
조금
story from
돌아왔다고
my own
합니다. 그런
experience.
면에서
Weddings and events, right? We went from no being able to do
결혼
that
같은
in 2020.
거죠.
I was meant to get married in 2020, first in June, then in September, then in June of 2021, and then finally in September.
2020년에 결혼을
The dynamic
계획했던
you
거를
see
지금 많이
is there's
실현되고 있다고
compression.
합니다.
Everybody had that same experience. So I went from a Saturday at one venue to a Sunday at another, right? And so that's a very similar sort of pattern that we've seen cutting across. Yeah. yes, yeah. I think maybe revenge babies as well. Which,
예,
yes,
보복적으로
I
애를
got
낳기도
a
한다고
10-week-old
합니다.
at home now. Hopefully he's awake watching this. So yeah, we've seen some of those dynamics from the rest of the market come back. And so it's not just been about leisure periods. As we get into September, we're seeing some signs of life in all segments. But by the end of the year, we're still going to be down.
9월부터는 좀 회복하는 게 보였다고 합니다.
5%, and that's when you take into account.
네, 올해
leisure up 10
초보다는
and
지금이 조금
everything
나은
else
것
a little bit
같아요.
lower. And so what does that mean? I'll jump a little bit to how that impacts price, right? Because we similarly are downstream from a price perspective, right? We're impacted by labor, we're impacted by food costs,
노동시장,
a
음식
variety of
비용의
other,
영향을 받고 있고요.
supply chain related things.
예, 공급 문제도 겪었습니다.
We look at our price on a year-over-year basis. I'm sure folks see it. If you're
매년
traveling,
물가를
you could see
보면
prices that are up 20, 25%.
20에서 25%
On
정도
the
비용이
whole,
늘었고요.
our industry forecast prices are around 15% up.
15% 정도 올라갈 거라고 매년
But when you
15% 올라갈 거라고
account
생각합니다.
for inflation over a 3-year period, so comparing to 2019, our real
2019년에
average daily rate,
비교해서
we're still lagging
3년치로
2019 levels, and it's really because of that lack of compression from
Still
all of the
2019년보다는
market
낫다고
segments
합니다.
coming back together, right? And so I think that's going to be the interesting thing to watch is as we hopefully see demand reach levels across all customer segments.
예, 수요가 2019년 상황으로 좀 돌아갈 거라고 생각을
Do you
합니다.
think that
조만간.
the pandemic experience has reshaped the way the industry operates?
Yeah, and so I think a couple things that are talked about there, and it kind of alludes also to the last question. There is a tale of two cities, right? And it's interesting because you see resort markets, drive-in destinations.
두
they have
도시의
been doing
이야기입니다.
quite well. Extended stay hotels have done really well. Again, Tom's Market and other markets like that, they've really supported.
어떤 도시는
extended
굉장히
stay,
잘한다고
travel.
합니다.
What we haven't seen is really the return to urban markets and large conventions, right? Those are the lifeblood of major cities, right? And so we're starting to see that recovery, right? But there's
많은
obviously
도시에 있어서
pandemic risks and
국제
other things
학회,
that folks
학회
have
같은
been
것들이
considering.
일어나는데 그런 것들이 지금
You need
돌아오고
that
있다고
overall
합니다.
return to desire of travel. And so we're starting to see that come back, and
그런 것들이
so
돌아오는
Las
게
Vegas and
보이고요.
Orlando, we're starting to see that
라스베가스,
sort of turn back up.
올란도
Markets like
이런
San
데도
Francisco, Chicago, New York, not as much, right?
시카고나
And San Francisco
샌프란시스코는
obviously much more
아니지만
dependent on
올란도나
tech
라스베가스 같은
which has
데는
been
큰
quite,
학회들이
different
박람회
than
같은
the
게
rest
계속
of the overall
열리기
business
시작했다고
community.
합니다.
So we're seeing a little bit of that. I like to think about sort of where do we want to get back to normal versus what's going to be a new normal that we expect.
예,
right?
우리가
Back to normal
보통으로 돌아갈
is return
거냐
to normal
아니면 새로운
segmentation. Folks are able
현실의
to
직면에
have
있냐,
their social
뉴노멀이라고
events,
그러죠.
get back to regular meetings, normal travel patterns, right? Students being back in school matter to us, right? Because people tend to
학생들이
follow
학교로
the school
돌아가고
vacation schedule. So as we
베케이션을
see that
가지고
come back to some form of normalcy, we're
예,
starting to
그런
see
것들은
normal
좀
travel.
이제 정상 상황으로 돌아가고 있고요.
From a new normal perspective, there's a couple things.
새로운
Right? We're seeing
상황은
the emergence of what we call workations, right? The idea that people can work
workation이라고
from
그러죠.
anywhere, right? So I'm not sure if that's the
아무
case
데도
for
안
you
가고 그냥
guys,
집에
but
있는
in
거죠.
many cases,
워케이션이라고
folks are
합니다.
saying, "Hey, I
일하면서
can not be in the
즐기는
office for a week."
베케이션이죠.
And what we used to call leisure travel, right? I had a conference in Las Vegas. I'm going to stay there for a couple days and stay over for the weekend and all that. Is actually something broader, right? That we start to see some return to a new customer dynamic where they want to have a larger room and stay in a place that they can work during the day and connected to the internet and all that good stuff. But then at night they can do all the things.
요즘 사람들은 호텔을 잡아서 큰 방을 구해가지고 일도 하면서 동시에 베케이션도 즐기고 그렇게 한다고 합니다. 낮엔 일하고 밤에는 베케이션을 즐기는
Hybrid
거죠.
meetings are interesting, right? I understand you guys were doing this in a remote fashion, right? We need folks to get together like this. We're not sure what the future of a meeting like this, where half the table's over television and half is in the room. That's an emerging potential trend that we're going to all have to figure out, right? Everybody's been on conference calls where it's extremely uncomfortable, where you're the one who's not in the room and everybody else is. So we've got to figure that out, but that will lead to some sort of new normal. And then the last thing I'll just call out
예, 많은 사람들이 자기 방에 머물면서 회의도 하고 뭐 그렇게 하는 걸 추진하고 있나 봐요.
For us, that's folks were trying to skip the front desk, right? That there's a little bit of a different model in how you engage with people in a COVID type world, which means you want your key on your phone, whether you're flying or you're in a hotel room. So we've had a heavy
호텔에
emphasis on
도착했을
that in our
체크인
business.
과정
We're
이런
seeing
거를
it as
좀
sort of a change
건너뛰기도
in
하는
customer
거
dynamics,
뭐
which
그러나 봅니다.
undoubtedly could shift sort of the labor model where hopefully team members are able to focus more on service.
예,
as opposed to
노동의 모델이 좀 바뀌고 있다고 합니다. 사람이 많이 필요하지 않죠.
And then just touching on labor, similarly as Judy said, our industry has been hit dramatically from a labor perspective.
예,
We're
노동
still 400,000
측면에서
jobs
우리
less
산업은 큰
than
충격을
where we were,
받았습니다.
from an accommodation sector. We see it in all of our hotels, and when you think a demand environment where on the weekends you're busy and during the week you're not,
예, 수요가
right?
주말에는
It's a
굉장히
difficult thing to
높았다가
labor schedule,
평일에는 또
right?
수요가
And
없고
you
이런
don't get the
상황입니다.
consistency of scheduling that our team members demand and expect. We're also seeing, the inflation of wages in our industry broadly double what is the broader wage inflation.
예, 임금도 두
typically
배나
in the
올랐다고
12+%
합니다.
range we've seen across sectors across regions in the U.S. So we're seeing some shifts. in
사람들을
that.
주말에만 일하게 만들고 또 임금도 두 배씩이나 올라가고 있는 상황이죠. 예.
The data that, thank you for the presentation. The data that you're presenting are for the U.S. or are they global?
U.S.
Okay.
Yeah, although we see similar
미국에서
trends, such that it
본다고
interests you.
하는
We
미국
do see
상황을
similar
얘기한
trends,
겁니다.
outside the U.S. One interesting dynamic is take Europe as an example. It's so much more dependent on cross-border travel, right? And so obviously that was more depressed when cross-border travel.
아무래도
was
이
more
정도만
challenged.
듣는
Here we
게
didn't
좋을
have
것
as much of
같아요.
that.
아무래도
The major
저는
US
지금
cities, right,
이제
the lack of international
어, 각각 산업에 예, 사람들이 나와가지고 예, 자기들의 이제 상황을 얘기를 하는데 얘기가 거의 비슷해요. 예, 다들 임금 상황은 올라갔고, 근데 경기는 많이 좋아졌고 회복을 했고, 뭐 하지만 임금은 올라갔고 비용도 여전히 늘어났고. 새로운 현실에 맞춰서 새롭게 적응해 나가고 있는 산업들을 보여주고 있는 것 같고요. 연준도 이런 것들을 다 고려해 가면서 뭐 경기 침체가 가져오지 않는 방향에서 또 연준 정책을 펼쳐 나가지 않을까 그런 생각을 합니다. 더 해주세요. 나 지금 가야 될 것 같은데 제가 3시에 약속이 있어가지고 조금 더 해요. 어떡해요?
It's undoubtedly a mixture
조금만
of
더
all things,
할게요.
right? And as somebody who grew up working in hotels and is passionate about that sort of service
파월이
economy
뭐
we
특별히
have,
더 얘기할 것 같지는 않아요.
it's in some ways can be less enticing of a job in a COVID type world, right? Essentially they were essential workers having to be face to face in ways that us in corporate office world we're not necessarily having to do. So I think there's an element of that which is we need sort of a mind shift back to where we were and the value in face-to-face experiences. When I think about what we're trying to do from an employment perspective, it's hard to get people to come back to work. So I think it's a little
예,
less
고용
of the,
측면에서 사람들을
our
다시
demand,
돌아오게 하기가 굉장히 힘들다고 합니다.
isn't requiring as many folks coming back. I mean, right now, as I said, we're close to 5% down from a demand perspective, so not massively for that level of job displacement.
Thanks.
So
Thank you.
can I ask just a related question? So recently I was talking to a large firm in leisure hospitality, and they were talking related to what Governor Brainerd just said, that their turnover rates, job turnover rates had doubled than pre-pandemic, that even when you can get workers, you can't keep them.
크리스토퍼
Is that
원래네요.
something you're seeing in all these
I'm
areas?
sure we would see something very similar. We're all competing for the same subset of folks. So it's a
사람들이
smaller pie that we're all competing for. right? So you
옮겨가는
see certain
이
places
비율이
where
어떻게
folks are putting
되냐고
up big
물어봤습니다.
bonuses to try to convince people to come their direction, and then we have to all go back and forth. And so the pie of workers in our industry broadly is just not quite enough.
So
예, 사람들을 오게
regardless of
하기가
what we
굉장히
do for
쉽지가
demand,
않고요.
you're still going to have demand for labor.
Yeah, I think that's the case.
Well, just thank you so much and
예,
congratulations.
노동 수요가 굉장히 아직은 강한 편입니다. 공급보다는.
I
예.
appreciate you being here with us. Our fourth panelist is Kara Walton. She's a director at Harbor Results, which is based in Southfield, Michigan. Kara leads the company's manufacturing intelligence business, which collects and analyzes millions of data points from thousands
예,
of
이분은 데이터
manufacturing
분석하는
companies
사람이
around the country.
나왔습니다.
Harbor
근데
Results collects data from more
자, 이 사람은 크게 문제가 없을 것 같아요. 뭐 이렇게 제조하고 데이터 분석하고 이런 쪽의 사람인데 이쪽은 워낙에 산업이 계속 좋은 편이라서 자, AI 전문가인 것 같은데 이쪽은 뭐 큰 문제는 없을 것 같고 사람 구하는 게 좀 뭐 힘들어서 임금이 올라가긴 하는데 저 어느 정도 예상이 가능할 것 같습니다. 실제 물류 쪽이라든지 레스토랑 쪽이라든지 지금 호텔 쪽이라든지 이쪽이 사실은 팬데믹 이후에 가장 큰 타격을 입었고 어느 정도 회복하냐가 제일 중요한 것 같고 그 위에 사람들은 일단은 뭐 자 자, 아무튼 예, 저 미국 교수 맞고요. 예, 자, 아무튼 자, 오늘 여기까지 하겠습니다, 여러분. 뭐 이게 뭐 거의 다 비슷한 얘기인 것 같아요. 예, 시장 상황은 베이지북 이번에 또 예, 다음 달에 나오고 뭐 이러면은 다 파악이 될 수 있을 것 같고요. 자, 아무튼 자, 아무튼 자, 예, 오늘 파월이 크게 뭐 큰 문제는 없는 것 같고, 예, 자, 오늘 이런 예, 사람들의 얘기를 듣고 연준이 어떤 정책을 펼지를 좀 이렇게 어느 정도 예, 생각을 해볼 것 같아요. 예, 그래서 자, 아무튼 자, 오늘 좋았고요. 제가 지금 가봐야 돼서 3시 약속이 있어서 저 가보겠습니다. 아, 파월 연설 5분만 통역하려고 그랬는데 파월은 진짜 아무 얘기 안 했습니다. 자, 갈게요. 구독, 좋아요, 알람 설정 눌러주시고요. 자, 가보겠습니다. 자, 내일 자, 아침에 라방에서 뵐게요. 자, 내일 아침 9시고요. 예. 한국 시간 밤 10시에 뵙겠습니다. 여러분 안녕. 네, 가볼게요. 핑크핑크님, 신디님, 묘경님, 자, 애플님 다 가시고요. 예. 자, 한두님 가시고, 예. 좋은 밤, 좋은 하루 되세요. 네. 달프님 필기 주셔서 너무 감사해요. 예, 갑니다.